Hola, so. Ani chamala Jashitele. Chapchik to good morning from Nepal and good afternoon and good evening.
Asatana kogi.
Hola.
Kona. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Ani chama kusitewe inshare in Berewa US.
And I hope everyone is doing well.
Ani Tadanda Marango share the Nigi share the number Nissan de Deni Yasilale Yasamuju Tombe Gizebe Yasilale Dres.
The Dharma that I will explain to you today and that you will be listening to is Gyaltsen Yoshul Tokme's 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas.
Addition the Mashe Gondu, the Niki number Tamala, the Yanga Tensuch Lengis.
Before I start explaining this text, I would like to once again remind you
that Tensu Lengi the Shimbakaya means the Zo Dita Gulong Yana Semba Rangi Sim Dita Namju Jundu Manazo Mang Chevaji Peche Nishu Zapshi Rangdo Shada La Lega. Lega Segore, Pichi Chue and Pichi Randu Chibuchi, Giritindu, Marayan and the Redu. They do Marabu Tam like the Nichi. Then they again that was Chetu, Chushu, Chu, Chi, Goga, Ninjaka, Dwere, that's lay Sambo Segore, lay Yabo, Kare, Chiba Yina. Chibi Kaduk de la Goga Lenche. 장주의 세모니 이제 약보지 시지 심지 탐 저기 제도 저기 삼 지켜봐이나 네지 딜라 된다 약보 니 장신이가라 펜토야지 차도 그래 친구도.
And there's really only the one thing to remind you of, which is your motivation or the mindset that you bring to the session. Really, one could say that the vast majority of our time throughout 24 hours of the day, we are entirely concerned with our own self-interest. It's the same for me. Even sometimes when we engage in Dharma practice, we bring this mindset that's really only interested in one's own aims. So therefore, when we do engage in some Dharma activity, whether it's listening to the Dharma, practicing, going to sacred sites, or performing virtuous deeds, it's extremely important to take that opportunity to really change one's motivation and suffuse one's activity with the motivation of bodhicitta, thinking that whatever we are engaging in, we are doing so for the benefit of all sentient beings. And if we do so, that will really make whatever we do meaningful and benefit both ourselves and others.
Rangi lega kari chena yantini chig mise chig dro digi re thingido Chong Chung Chung Ji Kya Yang, Sayere, Nyayere, Joyere, Dugere. Ita Kande China Peche Chashi Changdigire. Ni Mise Jodigire, Tingidu Chitang, Nichubu Inare, Tingjing Inare, Kuma Inare. Kande China Rana Susan Winile. Chik Mise di Kya Jodigire. Aina di Tenda Shira Midu Tingidu. Tadi Indu Teni Chik Mise Taju Inye Kawa. Milirumbuchi Top. 이 톱에 대에 까무래 이 까무 인도야한테 랑 톱용도 유배 장숨기권이 밀리는 거지 톱가 대한테 고급 상모지 예 락도 되니 디 뭐네 제 추선을 마당와체 졸라 마당와체니 심지 참지기 다 참마 마두나 마톱네 강 타타 강 직톱톱지 심지 탐지기 제도 지기 유제나다 주치들에다 졸람 남바시 사냐 두드로 가르치 갑수이나요 심지 탐지기 전 지기 유 삼바다 심 오늘 지 인고 루비팅니 직접이나 되니 최랑신 게더니 줄라 셈다 최니 아니 지금 마데와진 잘와 메와진 드니 지가 랑게 셈 규데 장 미생게 셈 심진라에 펜톡 토베기 누바데야 톡 톡스토 드니지 연구를 땡기로
But really, I think that one could spend one's entire life just consumed by one's own aims, one's own interests. You know, working, doing a little bit of business, eating, sleeping, going places, staying where we are, all of our plans, all of our activities, just for keeping up this particular life of ours, just for the sake of surviving, of making a livelihood, whether we are rich or not so rich or poor. Most people can just consume their entire time just taking care of the needs of this life. But I don't think there's much of a point to that. I don't think that's a very meaningful way to spend one's time. Having obtained this precious human body that is so difficult to obtain, that is so rare to obtain, whether one considers it in terms of its causes, in terms of analogies, or in terms of numerical comparison, this precious human body is extremely rare and difficult to obtain. So having gotten this opportunity, one shouldn't waste it. One shouldn't waste one's time, but instead put effort to the best of our abilities to wish to benefit all sentient beings, to motivate our actions with the aim to benefit all sentient beings. Even if we are not able to do so, we should try to the best of our abilities to have that motivation throughout all our activities, throughout the 4 day-to-day activities of eating, sleeping, going, and staying. One should truly try to motivate our actions so that they may benefit all beings, and really generating this motivation from the bottom of our hearts and from the marrow of our bones. And I really believe that if one does so, then naturally at all times one will be able to truly mingle one's mind with the Dharma. And as one further trains one's mind in this way, our ability to truly benefit others will definitely grow, I believe.
The dream can number two, December, Chudi, Jazz Lale, Jazumuju Tomi Gizebi, Jazz Lale, Sudi Materes.
So that being said, the Dharma today that you have come here to listen to is the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas by Gyaltsen Yosho Tokme.
Dila dini Tomar Geva Legide, Bardu Geva Shungide, Dini Tamar Geva Jugide, Sum Nani, the Tomar Dangmisora, Tomar Geva Dila Zambar Javata, Ni
Chaksawa.
Ore Dini Dini Shungi Dendela Mondo Juksuda, Mushil Juksus, Mondogi Juksu de la Chedu, Mushe de la Deni, Jibusum Gilam Juksuche, Kibu Chumu, Kibu Ting, Kibu Chembo. Deni Kibu Chembo de la Yang, Ni Janjuchodo, Simke, Kesudan, Ani Kunzo Janju Senda, Janam Janju Sim Niche, Ni Kunzo Janju Sim Delayang, Yamshatan Jeto Niche, Ni that the Tama Chasavare, and the Caps Bada Kire, Janam Janju Visimji, and Delayang, the name Yamshatan Jeto Niche Yavache, Yamshat is Shusimbains. The ring the Jetok Yamshasana Komja Capsurala Jetovina, the need on Cholam Gigaps. Ni drink the PJ the Jetok.
And so the text consists in three main parts: the virtue in the beginning, the virtue of the introduction, the virtue in the middle, the virtue of the main part of the text, and the virtue in the end, the virtue of the conclusion. The virtue in the beginning consists in the homage and the pledge to compose. And the virtue in the middle also consists of two parts, namely the preliminary practices and the main practice. The preliminary practices were the part on the preliminary practices was about how to engage in the 7 steps of preliminary practice, and the main part described the way of engaging in the path of the beings of the 3 types of capacity, so beings of lesser, middling, and highest capacity. The path of the being of highest capacity consists in generating bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And that itself also consisted of 2 parts, relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta consisted in the practice of relative bodhicitta during the meditation session and the practice of relative bodhicitta after the meditation session, so in the post-meditation. And so all of these parts we have covered until now, which means we have now arrived at the part on ultimate bodhicitta, which also consists in 2 parts, namely the meditation session and the post-meditation. Last time we covered ultimate bodhicitta during the meditation session, and so we have now arrived at the practice of ultimate bodhicitta in the post-meditation, that is to say, in one's daily activities.
Dendam Galsu Nyamsha the total combas, Jetop the Chadang Yula Denshin Pombas, and the Jetop the Ewan Nyamsha the total nyamsha to total kombache de nam janju semche ni jetop de la ni chadang ge yo la denshin pangwas ni.
And so the practice of ultimate bodhicitta during the meditation session consists in the meditation that is devoid of all conceptual elaboration. In the post-meditation, the practice of ultimate bodhicitta consists in abandoning the cause of attachment and aversion, namely clinging on to the true existence of things.
Tene de jetop chadang ge yo la denshin pangwa de la yang tene ni du cha yo la denshin pangwa dang yo la denshin pangwas.
And in the post-meditation, abandoning the cause of attachment and aversion, which is the clinging onto true existence, also consists of two parts, namely abandoning clinging onto the true existence of objects of attachment, and secondly, abandoning clinging onto the true existence of objects of aversion. And so now we will start with abandoning clinging onto the true existence of objects of attachment. And so within the text itself, this starts, this is verse number 23.
Yidong we yuldan chebana yar gidu gi chasun jishindu zabrnanya dembar midashi shinja pangwa jaselalins.
And so the root text reads, the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to let go of grasping when encountering things one finds pleasant or attractive, considering them to be like rainbows in the summer skies, beautiful in appearance, yet in truth devoid of any substance.
Tadi nyamsha kato tani zimi total komachiro ala ditu da nawala ko chira chido yo mares ji nawa yakbo shanare dubu shanare ko nyamsha ni me ke ngando pa total ngando sha yongdo nawala ko shira ge je dona yongge mare yakbo shanaya ko ila namdo yo mare che yo mare dubu shanaya telaya yaktu ki ni namdo che yo mares ko total ngando sha sha ore na namga dabu namga dila namdo yang phirkire jadi yang phirkiye jadi so cha yang phirkire ni pollution se ora thala re khari khanjo manjo phidugure na namga khorangla namdo yo mares khola phojur yo mare nyamja ka to tenderes.
So during the meditation session, the practice consists in abandoning all dualistic clinging, all conceptual elaboration, which means that whatever appears, whatever one experiences, whether good or bad experiences come up, we do not further think about these. Because one is resting in a non-dual state, whether good experiences arise, if good experiences arise, one does not further engage with them with further thoughts. If bad experiences arise, likewise, one doesn't further engage with them conceptually, thinking, oh, this is good, this is bad, because one is resting in a non-dual state. This state is likened to the sky, within which all sorts of things can fly, all sorts of objects can appear. Airplanes fly in the sky, birds fly in the sky, there can be pollution, there can be all sorts of objects appearing in the sky, yet sky itself is unchanged by these. Sky itself doesn't have any thoughts about any of these and doesn't move or change. This is similar to the meditation state.
Yamsha Kurang Prada Zimi Tsik Diran Jitaranawa Tidarangis Simni Duni Drubi Tatandras Yila Meji Gasalalen so Tsik Dini Shenes Dredal de Dini Shene Dene Sungzin Chi Sung Yul the Nang Zimbis Simji Tsema Dandawas the Zimba Dandawas Yila Meji Gasalalen said to us Yamsha Kapsu Sim Ditavuch Kores.
And so that state of the meditation session was described in the previous verse, which said, the practice of all bodhisattvas is never to entertain concepts, which revolve around dualistic notions of perceiver and perceived, in the knowledge that all these appearances are but the mind itself, whilst mind's own nature is forever beyond the limitations of ideas. So resting in that state that is beyond the limitations of ideas, beyond all types of concepts or thoughts, in the state that is free from all dualistic notions of subject and object or perceiver and perceived, without entertaining any concepts. This is the practice of the ultimate bodhicitta during the meditation state.
Di Nyamshagi di Jesu teni Jetoki Kapi Nyamle Di Tatsi Korangla Yidon Yuldan Chebanas Tanji de Yido Yila Michese Nyamshago Ta Nyamsha ni Kom Kituni Ma Langche Ta Tun Kamachu Jonga Nishu Chuzi Kaze Jabnaya Teni Ma Nyamsha ni Ma Tun Samche Then Jetoki Cholam Narang Kala Saka Dronare, Teni Yaga Dronare, Lega Dronare, the Kare Cheba Enayam, the Duda Semla Ni Yaga Dan, Duga Dan, the Kanjo Manjo Sharing Gures, the Ni Sharando Yidon, Yuldan Cheba Nas, the Kora the Yul Chigushar, the Yutlaya Jumze Karesana, Subda. Di ro rekja di samaji miki sukton ani nawege date nake tini ticho cheke tini ronyo ni luge rekja te taboge tini ji cholam ge kapsu ta yonguro ala thon yongure thwe yongure ani dende kapsu yido yulda chepa na sere Didu da Zimba Machi Gures, Zimba Che Yo Mares, Zimba Chakshin Che Yo Mares, Delva.
So that is during the meditation session. But then when one leaves the meditation session, in the post-meditation, it says, the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to let go of grasping when encountering things one finds pleasant or attractive. So however long one has been meditating, however long our session has been, whether it's 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, once one ends the session and goes on to one's daily activities, whatever they are, whether one goes to eat or work or sleep, whatever it is, one will have experiences of good and bad, right? Here, the text says, when encountering things one finds pleasant or attractive. And this refers to any type of experience, whether it's forms, sounds, smell, tastes, or touch. The sounds that one sees with one's eyes, the sounds that one hears with one's ears, the smells that one smells with one's nose, and so on, the taste with one's tongue, and the touch that one experiences with one's body. All of these happen in our daily life, right? They happen as we go through our daily activities. And so when pleasant or attractive experiences such as these arise, then one shouldn't cling to them, or one shouldn't have attachment and grasping towards them.
Disungre peje lobe ingni gese and miki suktona sula chashin ke sona ni chemalep tabu chagre tende ena chemalep se de butterfly ge ko suklape gaboer tuko marme de sukpe ning jibu thongo yeres ko marme de pel cheungdo jani ko dila ko ning jibu medo tabu thondo teko dina chong shagre chongdo parang teni shidu gore ko dunga chayang gores dina shenge teni naju ge da la shemcha shuk chamba ke sona teni rida tabu chagres rida ge ke nyembo den la nyende do teni kira rida sege denjogi menda music ji sha tenko menda jagar sida kun khoi ke la nyemda chune dal chak che tenko menda ko shidu gore ko donga nyangeres ini na ti di bunga sere ajo ena fly doa kashi box kashi kare chigarsana pena mendo nandro ko tima pe shimbo yodo mendo nangla kachi yangdo de nangla zudu doa zudu de gongda cha yangdo zani mendo de changma ka ende shini zumdu gore ka jabdu gore teni ko fly de ko nanglo la trap che ko nangla kor chini nangla ko simje shidu gore da tumni teni ti around the row the mare rola changna che rola changna ini nyamo jakju sungsere pena nya denzo do nya singlinge hukla sha tawsha anko ro digi pe nya e shimbo yore teondo tenko jakju digi hukki khala thepchini ko teni ko tunga nyange ro the Dinyana since Persha. Ene Sugda T Rocha, ne Regja Tamatenga. Ene Regja Lu Regja la Shenja Chana Langboche da Uchagres Damyan Damyona la Damni Langjin di Ko Subu di Yayamdu Subu Chembura, Eko Damba Nangla, Semote Subulande, Darde. Yoko damang la chuji ko damban damda damyo na ya tendu go mares ko shidu go res dungan go res ta didi su ranang su simje re la ya manda ki su da di ro rekja ranang su ki dunga res shenja chana ta ngarang zo mi da bo la pe shana ngarang zo le di changma yore su la shenja yere dala shenja yere Tila Shinjare, Rekjala yore, ji rola yore, thing around the Dingaga Dumanian Grace. The Indusan Dilata, Cheto Gabson de la Shencha, Chayo Marestre. Chinja Chuna, then Dumanian Grace.
Awesome. So Master Vasubandhu gave analogies for attachment to the five sense objects in the following way. When one is attached to a visible form that the eyes see, then one is like a butterfly. Butterflies are attracted to the flame of a candle. Seeing it flickering so beautifully, they confuse it for a flower, and they go towards the flame of the candle and get burnt and die. So that is a specific type of suffering that comes from the attachment to form. When one experiences attachment or craving towards the sounds heard by the ears, then one is like the deer who craves pleasant sound, who likes pleasant sounds, and will be attracted to pleasant sounds, which might be, for example, music played by hunters to attract the deer and then shoot it, so that the deer going towards the music that is being played gets shot and dies and experiences suffering. When one is attached to the smells perceived by the nose, one is like a fly, which is attracted to the pleasant scents that are emitted by a flower. And alighting within the flower, they stay there to enjoy those scents. And at night, the flowers close, right? So that the fly stays trapped inside of the flower and stays stuck and dies, and thus experiences suffering. When one is attached to tastes experienced by the tongue, then one is like the fish that gets caught on the hook. Fish are attracted to the taste of the morsels of food that are used by fishermen on their hooks, and so they bite onto the hook and die and experience suffering. When one is attached to the touch that is experienced by the body, then one is like the elephant that gets stuck in mud. Elephants who have such large bodies sometimes will go into the mud to cool down or to kind of scratch and itch, and they'll roll around in the mud and sometimes stay stuck and die and therefore experience suffering. So just in this way, each different type of animal experiences a different type of suffering based on their specific type of attachment to one of the five sense objects. Humans, on the other hand, are attached to all five of the sense objects. They get attached to form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And so that being the case, in the post-meditation session, one should not get attached to any of these, since any such attachment will result in suffering.
Bidabudi Karijini Takoresina Sukdati Ro Rekja any Bidabuki Chi Yul Kari Tesonaya Teni Yargi Dugi Jasun Anshita Koresere Vela Yargi Dugi Jasun Jishinduse Zebra Naya Dember Mita Shingse yargi dusugi chachundila ke mangbo ji zomchini yarka charba dang cheba chini nini ko chachun chape ningjibo ji namkhala thong yungures tini dilaya di ngazugi ji zebo thonggo yore ta khande thona ya dila longjoya kha yo maros ko sae yo mare ko digi chala nyoe yo mare dinye khangba nashi chini nyae yo mare ko mili zebuji thongma do phe ka yo mare phe thogo yo mare di ta chikche ni dila ko duse thongdong jires ngaraw chi sukda de rikja khare ji na yo na ya di negap jires yana di kamakhashi jire pena nyadang chemalek denjoge kyuksi ji ningjibo thongre de ko nangla shi dugre tuanya gres ngaraw so de de sukda buji chungna ya ji thongdo ningjibo thanda ji thongre di gi ngone ngola samlo ta yo na ko thela khaya dube yo mares di midaw berangshi de ji sukhorang la samlo stana nekap jigres yana nima khashi yana tunda khashi yana dawa khashi yana lo khashi re tene kale ranshi dugure te khora ya suk de yan zebo meba cha yana gyurwa thep yana rul yana meba cha yana ri thombo dawe na ma ri chen nida baranshi indo ko su khorang la temba dubaji thela madu bare de indo ko ranshi gi ko meba cha dugure se de indo ta chajun shintu ta kores yargi chajun shintu tan nang la nang yin bala ko nang la ranshi meba ko thela tembar madu baji ta thumna teni chinga jo dilaya yi don wa ji yona chakba ke dang yi do ma wa ji na shedan ke dende nyung ru chagri kendi karasana chi suk dila quran tema madruba tini chajun shindu ko she sona ngazu dila chi lagle matar bachi ani reaction nyung ru chatu gures.
So then how should one perceive form, sound, smell, taste, and touch? Like the text says, whatever outer objects one meets with, one should regard it like rainbows in the summer sky, beautiful in appearance, yet in truth devoid of any substance. Rainbows appear in the summer sky due to the coming together of many different conditions. Because it rains and so on, beautiful rainbows appear that we can see. And we appreciate their beauty, yet there is nothing in a rainbow that we can actually make use of. A rainbow doesn't provide food or any type of object that we can use. We can't use it to buy a house. We can't really use a rainbow for anything aside from being pretty. It really is of no benefit to us. And so that's the first aspect. The second aspect is that a rainbow is really just momentary. It appears for a short amount of time, a few seconds, a few minutes, and then it disappears. And it's the same for all forms, sound, smell, taste, touch. All of these are temporary. And so just like the butterfly or the fish, we can only enjoy them for a very brief amount of time, and then they may cause suffering. So whatever we see, for example, in terms of forms, even though they may appear to be beautiful, if we truly reflect on them, they lack substantive existence. They lack true existence, for they are only impermanent. They can only ever be temporary, lasting for maybe a few days or weeks or months or even years. But in the end, all must die. In the end, all bodies lose their beauty. All bodies change. everything must die and eventually rots away or faces destruction and eventually disappears. And so just in the same way as a rainbow, all things appear but do not have substantive existence. Therefore, whether we meet with objects that we find pleasant, we should not have attachment. And if we meet, or I mean, thinking like this, if we reflect on the fact that whatever appears lacks true existence, then even if we meet with objects that are pleasant, one won't experience attachment. And even if one meets with objects that are unpleasant, one won't experience aversion, understanding that they lack true existence, just like a rainbow. Understanding this will help us to react less to outer objects.
Ni zebar nange dembar mida xing se da di tangi ngi gong du shuba na xin ri yar ki ja sun da zo de ngarang zo chi suk da di ro re ja khare la chi nang wa yi na re thong wa da khare ngarang do kyen khare yo re se na suk da di ro re ja la kyen yo ma re ngarang zo ki di sim di dembar zimba chi zinking ki sim ji ra dembar group wa ngoni ji chila yore samne shimbuji yore samne sukdi thongda ningjibuji yore sam amju ji thana da de ngone yore samne kora chila ngone kora ji dembar group ji yore o di ta ngazola khorwala chamchu gores ena de chi sukda de regja di gyuma na shi milam na shi cha na shi temper madu baji ha gosona tin dila khari zebar nang na ya ta dembar di tagi yo mara yana chikona le de chawa de la ni shenja pong du gors kochi suk zebo yena dila ge yakbo ji dongwa ji na dila chakba pang du gure ani chige dila yang yakbo ji mathong ba yena yang tawa pang du gores dini chakdani de ko 가세 빵바 이나 데 코로 빵 두고 그랬어. 코로 빵은 산지 토베 자지자고 람디 차 두고 그랬어.
And so, as I explained, all of these things are beautiful in appearance, yet in truth devoid of any substance. Basically, the main point here is that in whatever appears, whether form, sound, smell, taste, or touch, where does the problem lie? The problem is not in the outer appearances. The problem is in our clinging onto them as true. The problem is in our grasping. The one who grasps is the root of the problem, not the object that is being grasped onto. Grasping onto things true as really there, as really good or really bad, thinking that they truly exist. That is the cause of our wandering in samsara. Therefore, understanding that all of samsara is but like an illusion, a dream, or a rainbow, though it may be beautiful in appearance, it lacks any substantive existence. It is not truly existent. Understanding this, one will give up attachment to objects that seem pleasant. One will give up aversion to those that seem unpleasant. And the extent to which one can abandon attachment and aversion is the extent to which one will be able to abandon samsara. The extent to which one forsakes samsara is the extent to which one will be embarking upon the path to Buddhahood.
And 그래서 말바이나 텔로인지 부 심바 미징 부 나웨 미징 심베징 슬라이라 심바 추지 나로바서 어텔로 그래 나로발라 송라 부 나웨 미징 심바 징스 다이 나와 숙다디로 렉자 너조게 나돌라 칭기 요 마레스 나돌라 심기 요 마레스 코르발라 다 나웨 미지 심베 징스 심바 디게테니 나도 칭스나 담세 코르발라타 다 참에기 바 조디 심바 드레스 니 심바 추지스 바 치로그 율다 나와 추세게 요 마레스 심바데 바 추스다 심바 추나 되니 나와 단다 짐바데 메용도 되니 고 송주 차도 그레스 단다 조 송주 마차기 규조디 심바디기 진 송주 차게 요 마레스
And so, as Tilopa told Naropa, Tilopa said, "Son, we are not bound by appearances. We are bound by our clinging." So it is not the appearances of form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so on that bind us in samsara, that keep us trapped or stuck in samsara. It's our clinging onto these objects that traps us in samsara. We don't need to get rid of outer objects. We need to get rid of our clinging onto outer objects. It's our clinging onto outer objects that is keeping us from liberation, not the objects themselves.
빵니 니 차바 셴바 미제바 장주 셈들라 페나 차바다 셴바디 마제바이나 니 디 드남기 셈제 차도 그레스 니 델라 테니 니 나라도 뉴몬바 파에기 탁 쳬버지 다단다 갑스 바바 니 갸셀 장주 셈바 남지 라레 차게 레스.
And so abandoning attachment and clinging, not engaging in attachment and grasping, that is actually the practice of ultimate bodhicitta. When one foregoes all attachment and clinging, one is practicing ultimate bodhicitta. And that is truly the best method for abandoning all the afflictions. And therefore, this is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. As the text says, the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to let go of grasping. And so this was the first of these practices, and the second is letting go of clinging onto the true existence of objects of aversion.
kapsu ado di gomgewa da tonglench jetob kapsu deni sanda di gomgre kai kote jeto ko chujuwa
Chuchu.
nyewar lemba na jure 말해봐. 오래래. 추추지체. 디다 단다에 값수 봐봐양 된담다 제톱 니시기도 와스. 가정 공도 되니 망체와 디 컨트리스나 셰당레 셴바레 참아 빵고 그랬어. 때 빵에게 디 님보디 가리 땡겨 그랬으나 잠다 닝지 땡겨 그랬어. The Tanda Kapsu Baba Dundam Simjero, the Indu Pai Gichedu Nimbutingi Mares, Koran Jetub Gekapsu, Kora Nawa Koran Mu Jigdember Madruba, then a Chazun Nanshin, Dundam Simgi Kaps, Tanda Kaps, Dingy Cheper the Deres, Chik Pai, the Chik Maba, Chik Mo Koran, Dember Madrubach. Indela Shencha Pangayada, Chik di Shencha Pangay Tabla, Nimbuten, Jamla Ninji Nitinch, then you go to them. But Dini Cheparis, Yamado, Gala Nyamcha Jeto, Wala Nyamcha Jeto, Nidoa.
Yes. And so before we go on with this, I would like to clarify something because both in the section on relative bodhicitta and the section on ultimate bodhicitta, we have these practices in the meditation session and in the post-meditation, right? So, for example, in relative bodhicitta, the practice during the meditation session was tonglen, exchanging oneself and other, and the practice in the post-meditation was the 10 ways of bringing negative circumstances onto the path. And now again, in the section on ultimate bodhicitta, we have the practice during the meditation session and the practice in the post-meditation. So then what is the difference here? Well, the difference is that in the context of relative bodhicitta, one abandons, one discards attachment and aversion by relying on an antidote. The main antidotes being loving kindness and compassion. However, in ultimate bodhicitta, one does not rely on an antidote to discard attachment and aversion. Instead, one looks directly at the essence of appearances and not finding any truly established essence, finding that they appear but lack true existence, just like a rainbow. One lets go of all attachment and aversion. So this is really the main difference between the practices of relative bodhicitta and the practice of ultimate bodhicitta. For relative bodhicitta, one relies on antidotes in order to give up attachment and aversion. For ultimate bodhicitta, one looks directly at the lack of essence of phenomena.
Adi Dangula de Shipawagi Jawa de Dungal Nazu Milam Bushitar Tunang Dember Sungwe Atangche, the Chir Mitun Gendan Chibise, Tulbartawa Jasalali.
And so the root text for the practice of abandoning clinging onto the true existence of objects of aversion reads as follows. The practice of all the bodhisattvas is to recognize delusion whenever one is confronted by adversity or misfortune. For these sufferings are just like the death of a child in a dream, and it's so exhausting to cling to delusory perceptions as real.
Da Maranzoda Janjucho the same Kenny, the Sudo Kibu, Danyamli, Kap Ladini, and you go to Shivanashi, oh, now Adam's back, and Subtati Raja Tamji Chajish, the Tapore, Tanya, Yamlena Chi, Chiundutini, Song Sem Delayan, Digito, Kibiki, Sorwata, Shar. And the day Sharsona, and the day Kabru, Tendelayang, Shencha Chimboch in the day Sona, and Kaleum Grace.
So when we as ordinary beings practice generating bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, by doing, as I previously explained, considering all form, sound, smell, taste, and touch to be just like a rainbow. Even though one may practice this as ordinary beings, nonetheless, still we will have experiences, for example, of great joy and happiness come up at times. And if we get very attached to these experiences of joy or happiness, then that will create a lot of problems for us.
Dene da senda degi dene cha yong sigires samsam. Dene ta ngarazo jigden de korwa indu dene nangla de yundu degi jibu maimba tunga ya yong sigires. Yan barje yong sigire. Ta tangi de gangla dunga naso milam bushi tarase dunga naso ta yong sigire mila ambo jega nachi ki dunga. Dene yurwe dunga ta dunga mangboji mido tokto papi dunga dunga samji micha bere tengma le thanda tingsang ki dujela dunga mangro cha der khaso ki chi ngobo yarge do yana degas ki teni semla lega mangbo cha ando dega te lega khajo mangbo cha yana degas ki ngara do dunga mangbo cha do pres ta dunga na do mangbo je cha yona ya teni ngara do choba do ji ina teni samlo tang she ko res.
But since so this might happen at times, right? We might get very attached to our experiences of happiness. However, since we are in samsara, life is not just made up of happiness, but we also encounter all sorts of sufferings, all sorts of obstacles, and however much adversity or misfortune one may encounter, one should consider all of these to be just like the death of a child in a dream. So all of the variety of suffering that we encounter in this life, starting with birth, old age, sickness, and death, and all the other sufferings, such as the suffering of change and so on, meeting with unwanted circumstances. All of this variety of suffering that, especially these days, is multiplied greatly with all the current circumstances in the world. And no matter how much happiness we may meet, that only creates further mental activity for us, creating even further suffering, so that we're constantly meeting with more and more suffering. However, as Dharma practitioners, when we encounter such adversity or misfortune, one should really reflect.
Da dunga na so milam pushi daras da dunga namba na so ba ya chung na yang ti thala yang bo da sin che so na ni ji thul de ma do thala ji dunga ji me ba re da dang ngwe la dewa de ya de gi de ya cha jun shin du ina khare na wa je dunga yang cha jun shin du re ko thala du be ma res da de khande ji du ma res na milam pushi daras cha milam ge na la pugu da ma ge ba mi ji le pugu me ge ji la pugu ji chung de pugu de ya ma shi ba na shin ji cha de milam nang lo la long pugu de shi yong do khala pe tunga mang bo chung re o pe sa se ne ta mu da ma da chi da tang bo milam la pushi la pugu ko ra ma ge pugu ga ni shi ko res da dunga chung de ge ko pugu ma ge ne pugu shi we milam mi ro tang mo ne re chen de ko chu da ko mo ne re chen demba ge shu che ta ko milam nang lo la ta ko pheji mu ni nyen ko sang mo lom ba su ye den de ge chen ko da ni che yong do de mere puku kora maje wala share the pasus re de na shi res tunga na so khande ji marangzola choro yong na re nang na re dingone thela temba drupa ji yo mares.
So all of this variety of suffering one should recognize to be just like the death of a child in a dream. That is to say that whatever we experience, whatever arises, if one truly looks at it, if one truly examines it, one will find it to be delusion. Not, that is to say that all of our experiences lack true existence. They lack a substantive essence. There is no essence, truly existent essence to our suffering. Just like we previously said, if all experiences of happiness and joy are like a rainbow, so likewise, actually, our experiences of sorrow and suffering are like a rainbow. They are not truly established. They exist in the same way as the death of a child in a dream. Imagine that you have a dream in which, a child who doesn't really exist is born to you and then grows up and then dies. And then that person having the dream is, extremely sad. We can suffer a lot in a dream. So the child dies and we're extremely sad and crying and so on. But there never was a child, right? The child never existed. It was born in the dream. It dies in the dream. What wasn't really born can never really die either. So all of that suffering in the dream, it's complete delusion, right? Thinking that it's true, we suffer greatly and we cry and so on and so forth. But the child was neither born nor ever died. And in the same way, all of our experiences of suffering, all of the unwanted appearances and so on that come up, they similarly lack true existence.
네, 출낭 덴버 송위 아탕체스 출베 나와든지 덴버 조 단행의 공도 쉬바나시 동알데 응원에 요래 something 덴버 송에 아탕체스 탕체스를 된데 동아망보 이 인도 미팅 비켄단 티베세스 나랑도 위 미세데 낭로라야 다 미팅 비켄 망보체스 그래 나랑도라 키랑 참바레 랍시기레 키랑 독자레 랍시기레 마임발 레슨 그네 간도 마중기 켄 독자 멤버 된저 체시기레 나랑도라 kenn khasu chena ya dini dil trulba ta she gores di sama chures ji denla one kharang ji tembar duba ji mere ina ya ta tembar duba pena me be pe tenji shawan ji pushi ba ta bo milamna juma ta bo dene gi ji trulni dene thong de mare ma do denla yo mare samna dini 지게 가서 델라 단다 탕치고 말랑 댐베 춘낭 댐버로 소 아탕치에서도 띵나라도 탕치고 말 동안 시라 용거 말했어 나라서 미셀라 데 나신지 치토바이나 된 장주 선반남지 라글렌 차그레스 장주 선비 라글렌 차그레스.
And as the text says, it's so exhausting to cling to delusory perceptions as real. So, like I explained before, think it's the believing in the suffering, believing that this suffering is true, that it's truly happening. That's what's so exhausting, right? And therefore, whenever one is confronted by adversity or misfortune, which happens a lot in life, we encounter a lot of bad luck, a lot of negative experiences, such as people accusing us of lying, people criticizing us, people contradicting us, and so on and so forth. Whatever negative circumstances we may encounter, whatever negative experiences we may encounter, we need to recognize those as delusion. We need to know that they are completely delusory. All are just confusion. They have no true existence. They do not have any truly established essence. Like I explained before, they exist in the same way as the death of a child in a dream or as a magical illusion. They have no substantive existence, but instead are just delusion. Understanding them to be so, seeing them as such, seeing them as false. We won't have to be so exhausted by them. We don't have to suffer as much from negative circumstances when we understand that they lack any truth or real existence to them. And if one is able to see them in this way, then one will experience far less suffering in this life. And so therefore, the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to recognize them as delusion.
There is some Chergi, Singaya, Jidrogu, and the Jugi program Jigla. To what Jemagi, Twinkie Capsule. Jigis.
Yes. And so we'll stop here for today. And I actually need to go to another Dharma program. Therefore, if you have any questions, please keep them for next time and I will answer them then. So we will stop here and I'll dedicate the merit.
Sunamde Tamje Zigbani, Tamneni Bedana, Tamjini, Kegana Jimbalado, Sibe Zolendo, Andalwara, Jo, Janju, and Jorambo, Jemaje, Banam, Kijurji, Gebanyamba, One Gondo, Belvara, Jo, Demba, Kamsu, Jamba, Dantemba, Nivish, and Rosa. In the below Darjin, Yemba, Demba, Urene, Benda, Jo.